I work in a local NGO called Brazilian Interdisciplinary AIDS Association. ABIA coordinates a working group on intellectual property rights called GTPI. This group, which gathers several NGOs, actually 14 Brazilian NGOs and Doctors Without Borders, Brazil, in addition to researchers and individual activists. We work together in terms of access to medicines in Brazil. Well, this is a part of legal framework for access to medicines in Brazil. We have a constitution from 1988, established a public health system. The unified health system provides integrated therapeutic treatments, which implies the obligation of the state to provide medicines for all who need. In 1996, we have two important laws. The first one is thanks to the social mobilization and pressure from the National AIDS Program. The federal law 9313 was approved. This law strengthened the existing legal framework guaranteeing free access to ARVs especially. Also in 1996, we have a new industry property law. The policy of universal access would, however, be undermined by international agreements that impose the obligation to grant patents to the pharmaceutical sector, thus radically transforming the context of HIV/AIDS in Brazil. Since that time, Brazilian public and private laboratories were able to produce ARVs. Well, this is the flexibilities we have in patent legislation. We have compulsory license, of course. We have experimental use, Bolar exception. We have a kind of flexibility, really Brazilian case called prior consent or anuência prévia. This is a kind of flexibility. It's implicit on the paragraph 8 from the TRIPS. That means the grant of a patent in the pharmaceutical field depends on the analysis and consent of the National Agency for Sanitary Vigilance. This is a really specific case. We have parallel importation, but only in a limited way, because the parallel importation in Brazil is connected to was compulsory license has been issued. So we don't have a completely parallel importation. Well, this is the landscape of ARVs distribution in Brazil. The ARVs in red, we have local versions. Well, someone does not have patents granted in Brazil because they are old. It's the case, for example, Saquinavir. Or they have their applications denied from the patent office, the case of Tenofovir, for example, and Efavirenz, because it's compulsory license. Well, the GTPI, among other strategies to advocate for access to medicines in Brazil, press for the use of TRIPS flexibilities, including in the judiciary level. We have this case for the public action in 2005 against the Abbott and against the the Ministry of Health, because after failed attempts at negotiations, Brazil's then Minister of Health in June 2005 declared Caletra to be a public interest. This declaration was the first step towards issuing a compulsory license for reasons of public interest. But in October 2005, a contract was signed with the Brazilian government, keeping Abbott as the supplier of the drug. The deal, which did lower the price, also came with some TRIPS Plus provisions. Once the agreement was signed, civil society organizations from GTPI in conjunction with the Public Prosecution Service, filed a civil public action, the first of its kind in Brazil, against the government and against the ABUT. The case received a negative decision, unfortunately, in 2010, on the grounds that issuing a compulsory license would trigger commercial retaliation by the US. The case is in appeal court now. As I said, the battle in local level in concrete terms to issue a first compulsory license was not new in 2007, but the silence of the government about it was unacceptable. The civil society called Brazil at that time a tiger without teeth. In 2007, efavirenz was used by 75,000 patients in Brazil, who represent 38% of the patients undergoing treatment. Each dose of efavirenz was marketed for about $508 per patient per year, representing a total cost of $50 million per year. Well, since November 2006, the Brazilian government attempted to negotiate a price reduction with the patentee of this medicine, Merck Sharp & Dohme. Initially, the company presented a proposal of reduction for only 2% in price. After efavirenz was declared an issue of public interest, Merck reduced the price by 30%. The government considered Merck's proposal as unsatisfactory, and finally, in May of 2007, issued a compulsory licensing for the initial import of generic versions from India, and after that for local generic laboratories. It's important to say that the experience from Thailand was really important for us at this time. I remember a document called 10 Burn Issues about compulsory licensing in Thailand was read really careful this document and produce a local and Brazilian version for this document. Was really useful for us. Thank you, Thailand. Well, here we have a national efavirenz, local efavirenz in 2009. Lessons. The issue of compulsory license was not a trivial measure. It's important to say this. We had to face the mass media pressure against it. We had to organize the social mobilization to support the compulsory license in public hearings, newspapers, articles, when the Doha Declaration was used as an important framework to support this measure. The important support from civil society groups, key players, and IP issues experts was really important at that time, so this international support was really important. And eventually, the use of TRIPS flexibility demands a favorable political scenario and a lot of pressure. In conclusion, well, 10 years in perspective, how can I say how I say the use of TRIPS flexibility, especially the issue of the only compulsory license in Brazil, had strong components, the pressure of civil society and the favorable political scenario. It's important to say that have a different situation now. Brazil has different strategies in local level and international levels. In my opinion, compulsory license is not a local agenda now in the new government. However, it's important was the defense of President Dilma about the use of compulsory licensing against the lobby for the removal of reference to the Doha Declaration in NCD meeting in New York in October. Actually, in a local arena, compulsory license is a subject old-fashioned, something like that. And it's really important to observe and to defend the use of other flexibilities. For instance, the right of WTO members to define the patentability criteria in accordance with their particular national priorities. For instance, the patentability requirements in Brazil are broad. We have problems with the patent local office. And the civil society had difficulties to take part of the debate of revision of requirements. We have a lot of problems with the prior consent now in Brazil. Actually, the prior consent is almost extinct for lack of political will on its preservation. And finally, we defend the keep of use of pre-grant oppositions. I believe in pre-grant oppositions. All patent applications subjected to pre-grant oppositions presented by civil society were denied. Tenofovir is in public domain now in Brazil because we have pre-grant oppositions. So for me, pre-grant oppositions is a way for civil society to have a central role in order to put some technologies in public domain in a proactive way. And finally, challenges. A lot of challenges. Well, we have TRIPS Plus provision in discussion in local legislative, in judiciary, and TLCs. Some measures against use of flexibilities or trying to import some TRIPS Plus provision are coming to Brazilian scenario in law bills and decisions from federal courts. We have, for example, a law bill about linkage. We have problems with data protection in the judiciary level. So, another question, another topic really important in Brazil now is the contracts in terms of transfer of technology. Transfer of technology between big laboratories and national laboratories. Brazil announced 20 public-private partnerships to develop essential medicines. We don't have information about these contracts. We have really, really important problems in terms of accountability and transparency of these contracts. And at the end, the sustainability of A2M movements in Brazil, according to our experience, it's fundamental to have pressure from civil society so as to mobilize people and make pressure to the use of TRIPS flexibilities and the use of Doha Declaration. But today, the sustainability of this work is harder in terms of funding. Well, we have a lot of challenges, but I'm not so optimistic today. I'm so sorry. Okay, thank you.